in the 90s, there was this period of romantic comedies that had really big, lush orchestral scores where they were really unapologetic about the emotions they were trying to communicate. And it led to so many beautiful scores where you just, it feels... It was interesting when you were talking about, you were already in my headspace when you were saying, the oboe, it's sort of schmaltzy, but not cheesy. And I would argue if you're 18 now and your only knowledge of romantic comedies is, I'm trying to think of what would even be a contemporary example. The aesthetic has changed a lot.
Let's just, okay.
I feel like a speech is incoming and I'm ready.
I want to get it out of the way immediately because I was actually hoping it was going to be, I was like, you know what? It's not going to be that noticeable. And then the second I see myself, I look like an eager stand-in understudy just waiting to get called up for Yul Brynner in The King and I.
Oh, God.
It's just... So I did a shoot yesterday, and we did it may be out by the time this comes out. We did this great 2 hours in a makeup chair. It's one of the longest times I've ever done in a makeup chair.
Interesting how just that fact is interesting to me, considering how much time you've spent performing and how much that's such a part of the acting profession for, the film and TV crowd.
Yeah, but oddly enough, the previous record holder was for infamous Second Son. Maybe Binary Domain.
What is even the value of makeup in a situation like that?
In Second Son?
Yeah.
Dots.
Oh, so it's not makeup. It's the performance capture setup.
Still makeup. Like, makeup artists are the ones that do that. So,
but you get at the distinction. I mean, like, it's not makeup
it's
for
not
purposes of
special
what
effects.
Yeah, and it's not like adding scars or aging your face and that kind of thing. It's purely about the tech.
Well, no. I mean, yes, but so is, adding makeup or a scar or whatever is done for the purposes of camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is so that the character comes across best to the camera. So that the audience perceives the grizzled survivor or the aged man or whatever.
I
so
guess
this is the same thing.
I guess what
I understand the function of what you're saying, but it's what oddly enough I've never thought about it in this sense, but it's kind of the same thing. Right. Nobody's listening to what we're talking about right now because all they can see is the fact that I just really, really, really want to be in a My Chemical Romance cover band. So. The point is that they put this incredible makeup on me, and we shot like this great blacklight shoot, and they're like, we're gonna get this off of you, and it came off, and they were like, the eyes are gonna be hard. I'm like, I had a band in the 2000s. Okay, I'm no stranger to getting eyeliner off, and dude, I came home, and Pam was like, I've got like great makeup remover things, and so I got after it with that until my eyes were just like screaming. I washed my face. I got in the shower this morning, and this may be me now. I don't know. You may be looking at the new Troy. This may be permanent. I was like, you sure you didn't tattoo this onto my face? So
the lasers and the little subtle wisps of smoke should have been a little clue that this was a bit of a surgical, like the guy in a lab coat doing the makeup was a bit of a tell.
Yes, like, don't move.
Yeah.
This is by your eye.
You'll go blind.
Anyway, I feel like I should just walk around. Like, I don't care anymore, but I just feel like for the rest of my life, people are going to be confused when they see me with my wife and Traveler. And they'll be like, how does this match up? Do they know? Or is it just like a really cool marriage? What is it? I don't know. Anyway.
If random strangers unprovoked keep coming up to you and just saying, I think this is great. I just want you to know I support this.
We support this, man. This is what we've been trying to go for. Oh, so many of my gay friends would be like, we knew the
I
whole
know.
time.
This was inevitable.
It's like,
I
come
had
on.
that. I had that experience once at a. I was doing this film that I wanted to use baby toys as kind of the primary instruments. So like, as you know, there's
Is this
so
the
many.
horror film?
Yeah, it's called Grace, and there was a little like baby R Us kind of store, just walking distance from my studio. So I remember walking in there with a buddy of mine, a composer, and I was like, anything that makes noise in here, let's get. So, you know, and my favorite one ended up being the little hard, like either soft plastic or hard rubber thing filled with water that you would put in a fridge
Susie
for when they're
wets herself
teething.
or whatever it's called. It's terrible.
No, it's for teething. It's you chew on it. You chew on
Oh.
it. You put it in the fridge so that it's cold water and it has some give.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, exactly.
For me.
I would have guessed, you know. So yeah, that ended up being my favorite because it had this like sort of sound when you shook it, and a very like liquidy. It's very nasty and ASMR-y when you have it real close to the mic. And so and another one that I really liked that I was like, it's funny. I think most of the people now buying this is buying it for different reasons, but the little tooth zip ties, you know, that have like this the sort of a zipper that when you pull it through, it's doing this. And I would pull them through real slowly and then pitch it way down and stuff. And so, yeah, it was
cool.
full of great sounds. And so I was in there basically just buying armfuls of little baby things with this buddy of mine. And then we came up to the counter and the cashier, she looks at us, these two guys just pour out all these baby toys and we're all excited. And she's like, so are you guys adopting or do you have a surrogacy or what's the plan?
No, he's pregnant.
Yeah, it was funny because my friend, he was, you know, he grew up like in South Carolina or Georgia, and so it's like, you know, there's some LA culture shock a little bit every now and again, and this was almost 20 years ago because I remember I put my arm around him and I said, I know, it's so great, we're really happy, and he was kind of like,
Hey man,
we're right up against the limit of what I'm comfortable with.
This is making me feel things that I'm not prepared to feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a conversation I'm not ready to have.
Yeah, it was so
I
damn
remember.
funny.
I'll do one final anecdote because I know that you're chomping at the bit to get this in there, but I won't say who it was that did this. But a friend of mine who has just a deep, deep, deep affinity for water found himself with a free day and decided to spend that day in a beautiful summer day at a water park. And what he discovered was that a young man in his late 20s, early 30s should probably never go to a water park by yourself.
Alone? Yeah.
Alone. Because here's this dude, and he's doing all the slides, and then all the moms see is just this one dude that's just taking a break, looking at all the kids in the wave pool. And he was like, I'm going to go.
Slowly nodding the whole time.
I get it.
He's like,
okay,
super parched also, so the whole time he's just going.
So on our last previously on You Gotta Hear This, we got deterred by a tangent, very on brand for us, about streamers and punches, and you had this incredible thing prepared, and true to form, we never got to it. So I am going to very graciously, in a congenial way, step aside and allow you.
Not at all.
Invite you to.
Well, don't care about that either.
What is it that you are chomping at the bit to share this
Well,
time?
as you can imagine, the list is endless. Every time I listen to something on Spotify now, ever since we started doing this, I have this moment where I'm like, oh, you know, this makes me think it could be interesting to do this and then this and this, and I make little emails. So my inbox is a total disaster of notes to myself for future installments. Okay. So yeah, you got to give me some forewarning if you start getting really sick of these, because there's years worth of material.
Right.
So I waffled a lot on where to go this time. It would be so easy to just only ever do Goldsmith, and I was like, I gotta mix it up, and I was really happy with the Silvestri parade last time, and then what was I watching? Something came up where I was watching, and I thought, this is a whole untapped kind of war chest.
If you're gonna talk about Friends and the brilliance of the bass, the synth bass line, I'm gonna hang up.
You mean Seinfeld?
Yeah, did I say Seinfeld? What did I say?
You said Friends. No, Seinfeld is the like fun, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Don't hurt yourself.
Jerry Seinfeld was dancing in a fountain, right? That's how
Yes.
it worked with Kramer.
They should do that. They should do a little switcheroo. Are they still making those?
Bang,
So
bang, 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 bang.
I wrestled with actually the funny thing, I watched an interview
Shit.
once. Yeah, sorry, you did it. I watched an interview once with Jonathan Wolff, who did the music for Seinfeld. And the funny thing is, if you think about it, the two main ingredients of that score are the bass and then all the mouth noises. And if you think about it, it's actually really musically unique for a show that's just a bunch of people sitting around talking. Like it has a striking sonic identity, which is so much more unique than 99% of sitcoms. I mean, even Friends, it's just, strum a bar chord when you come back from commercial and call it a day, and you're fine. And most, fit kind of more or less along those lines. And Jonathan Wolff said, he goes, Jerry has a pretty high voice, so I wanted something that could sit comfortably below him. And then the mouth noises was just basically, I think, just found himself thinking about the fact that it's a show purely about them talking or something along those lines. I can't remember precisely, but it was very much just, well, here you've got this guy talking up here like this. So, all right, boom, 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 and then call it a day. And I was like, fuck, man, that's actually pretty brilliant.
Because, I mean, it exists kind of outside of, it's not like it's a bed that's happening underneath the conversations. It's stingers and bumpers, right? It's
Except
kind of like,
the first few seasons, the show always began with a cold open on Jerry doing stand-up.
right? I remember that.
And that always had the music playing underneath, so it felt almost like a little bit like a montage, and then the music would stop, the stand-up would stop, and we'd go into the episode. So
Okay.
they moved away from that formula somewhere in the middle of the show, like season 3, 4, something like that. But those beginning days, you definitely would have that, underneath
I
him
believe you.
talking while during the opening stand-up.
Oh, I know
bit.
what you're talking about. Okay.
So it
I've
actually
seen enough of
was
that.
underscore of a sort.
So I'm looking at the clock. I have 45 minutes before I have to go to my day job. So what is this war chest?
All right,
that you
so
have?
I'm going to just play something with no setup other than to say it has nothing to do with Seinfeld.
Okay.
And I just want to know, there's a remote chance you'll recognize it. I doubt it, but you might. And I just want to know your take, and then I'm going to unpack, and then I'll play you the things I have subsequent to this.
Okay.
So first off, just want to make sure you can hear
So
that.
that's, yeah, I want to say immediately it's, hold on. So I go,
If you name it, this is going to be savant level.
it's either like Thomas Newman
Nope.
or James Newton Howard.
Yes.
James Newton Howard?
Yep.
I'm
I'm very impressed.
It's either, hold on, Mrs. Doubtfire.
That's Howard Shore,
Oh shit. Okay.
which is a funny piece of trivia in its own right in my mind. Like of
Okay.
all the Cronenberg horror guy or the Lord of the Rings guy, but let's throw in Miss Doubtfire in there.
Or like it's like 90s feel good comedy. Like it feels like is it Dave?
It was Dave. I am blown away. I'm totally. I couldn't remember if we've talked about that movie before, but I feel like no one has. I feel like anyone I talked to today has no idea what that movie is.
That's
so
who I want to vote for every 4 years. I want to vote for Kevin Kline as Dave because
That's so damn funny.
if we can't get, then why are we doing this from the beginning? Oh, it's so good. Ving Rhames, Sigourney Weaver in the second. I think she was very attractive in Alien, or Aliens really, but she was gorgeous in this. Thanks for doing this, Ellen. Oh, so good. I love this movie.
It's
Come
funny
on,
too
man.
because it's such a preposterous idea. Like, let's just get a random citizen to stand in for the president. Like, it's such a hilarious. Somebody just dashed off a thing on a napkin and goes, "You think there's a movie here?" And then they actually managed to make, a viable movie.
Compelling case.
It's Ivan Reitman, who
Of course.
other than Ghostbusters, most of his movies are not the greatest in my opinion.
What do you mean?
He's one of those guys I want to love, but other
He's
than
a Chris Columbus. He was the voice of a generation. I wouldn't put him at like John Hughes level because I don't think he was having as much of a conversation as John Hughes was.
other than Ghostbusters, what do you put on that level of his?
Well, I mean, as far as popularity,
No, in terms of quality. I mean,
let's look at his.
they kind of correlate.
Ivan
but
Reitman.
he made a lot of really cheesy movies.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's look at his filmography. I mean, Cannibal Girls. Come on. First of all, Meatballs, Stripes, Legal
forgot
Eagles,
Stripes. It
no.
was
Dave, 6 Days, 7 Nights. We shouldn't even talk about.
Yeah, and then same with My Super Ex-Girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, look, he definitely after Dave, it went down. Once he made Arnold Schwarzenegger pregnant. Speaking of, it's very prophetic.
That
He
was
really
him
liked
too.
working.
Also, what was that? What's that movie called again with Danny DeVito?
Twins. I was about to say he
Yeah,
liked
yeah.
working with Arnold Schwarzenegger. A 2-picture deal. Yeah, he's not great, but I mean, I definitely when I see Ivan Reitman, but that's him as a producer only. Maybe it gets a little better.
Wait, no. What, the Schwarzenegger pregnant? It's not Twins.
Private Parts. That was it. That was another. Private Parts was
The
fantastic.
Howard Stern movie.
Yes. Have you not seen it?
I have. I did not remember that was Ivan Reitman. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say the best thing he made was Jason Reitman, who I love.
There you go, 100%. And that to me, as a writer especially, and as a director, he's incredible.
Oh yeah.
I forgot that Thank You for Smoking came before Juno. I thought Juno was what put him on the map.
I like many people, I saw Juno, and then
I was like, okay.
I was like, what else has this guy done? And then went and watched Thank You for Smoking and was like, this is even better. Thank You for
Yeah, Thank You
Smoking
for
is
Smoking was
hilarious.
Up in the Air was.
That to me is like top 5 probably of all time. Like that movie wrecks
I've
me.
not handed out. I've handed out only 2 of these in my entire career.
What a cameo that is.
I mean,
That whole movie is so goddamn perfect. Yeah.
so accurate. Okay, so we're doing
All
James
right.
Newton Howard. I'm so happy.
We're actually
I'm so happy.
There's actually multiple composers.
Okay.
But yes, let me just play this for due diligence.
I
I
get a
love-
gold star, bitch.
You really blew me away because that was a sound check for the record. that was yeah.
It also sounds a little bit like Liar Liar. Did he also do Liar Liar?
He did do well. There's a funny story with that. Let me play this, and then I'll talk about that.
Man, I am batting. James
You
Newton Howard is
crushing
one
it.
of my like. I feel like I always go. Travis Willingham, whenever I ask if it's a band from the 70s, he always goes either Creedence Clearwater Revival or the Eagles. Those are like the 2 bands that he believes that wrote every song in the 70s. So James Newton Howard is kind of one of my like. If it was written in the 90s or the 2000s, like James Newton Howard, that will always be my go-to. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
Play
no,
more than
no,
2 parts. Go ahead.
I love it. I love it. Here we go. I'm just gonna get to the theme.
Beautiful waltz. That's an oboe, right?
It's
that
clarinet. Yeah, you've done that reverse twice now. That's an oboe.
That's an oboe. The most sentimental instrument. Warm fuzzies, man. I want.
Right?
So good. This is why Snuffy Walden. I mean, I'm deeply entrenched right now in West Wing, and
Right.
that, like, Dave came out in '97, I think.
I think that's right.
I would have to look, but I think it was like '97 feels right. And then, West Wing came out in '99, so I would bet that they were starting to kind of like put this together in the wake of that. And it has that feeling of, again, oboes just feel like mauve of everything in '90s, and it was just so to me it was such a ubiquitous kind of thing to use, where was that kind of schmaltzy but not cheesy palette.
You're absolutely, you are so plugged into what I wanted to talk about. It's so funny. You're basically everything you're saying. I'm going, yeah. So moving on, because it's spot on. Because funny enough, around that same time, was Tom Shadyac Liar Liar. A couple years later, I think '99 or something like that.
Tom Shadyac? No, I think Liar Liar was '96. Let me check my work.
It was before Dave? That can't be right.
Liar Liar came out in '97.
So check Dave then, because were they the same year?
Oh man, Dave was '93.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I should have known that. I should have known that because '93 was my big movie year. That was like, we'll get into that whole conversation later. But anyway, okay, go ahead.
So James Newton Howard was hired to do Liar Liar, and he wrote the theme, and then he got busy on it was like Waterworld or something, completely consumed him, and he called the director and said, I'm not gonna be able to finish this movie, but I've got a guy that everybody in town knows about, but he's kind of like this, it's like an egg waiting to hatch. He's this secret weapon of Hollywood that hasn't popped yet, and I'd love to hand what I've written over to him and have him take it to the finish line. And the composer he was referring to was John Debney, who this film was like a big. He had done Sequest DSV. He had done random, sort of sideman type work on Star Trek Next Generation and stuff, and he'd been around. And he had done at the time, and possibly still the record holder of the biggest flop in history, the movie Cutthroat Island. But
I love that movie.
Well, you're
Matthew
the only
Modine
one who even saw it.
Oh my
it
God,
literally
so good.
made like $1 million against $100 million something budget.
Another Frank Langella movie.
Yeah. Dave also.
Cutthroat Island.
So Debney did Liar Liar using James's theme, and what I love is that I have that queued up as well, which you will recognize.
Flutes with strings, right?
Yeah. And brass in the chords.
Yeah, the low bed.
Mm-hmm. There's your oboe again. See? So
It's a really high oboe, though, right?
they can go. Yeah, it's getting there. They can go more, but yes. So here's another. See if you can clock this one then.
Christmas movie?
You would think so, but no.
I don't know.
That's My Best Friend's Wedding, Julia Roberts movie.
Pam would know that I wouldn't.
Point being,
I've seen it. That's not the one that I would be like, oh my god, I've seen it so many times.
Also, James Newton Howard. Funny enough, though, there's a few other composers in my lineup here, but I found myself thinking the other day I was going to do something totally different with this, and then I thought, in the 90s, there was this period of romantic comedies that had really big, lush orchestral scores where they were really unapologetic about the emotions they were trying to communicate. And it led to so many beautiful scores where you just, it feels... It was interesting when you were talking about, you were already in my headspace when you were saying, the oboe, it's sort of schmaltzy, but not cheesy. And I would argue if you're 18 now and your only knowledge of romantic comedies is, I'm trying to think of what would even be a contemporary example. The aesthetic has changed a lot. You think of composers like John Bryan and Rolf Kent, movies like Up in the Air is obviously not a romantic comedy, but that whole dramedy idea of, the Jason Reitman or Alexander Payne, where things get way more real and they're less over the top,
They're less whimsical.
Yes, far less whimsical. The movies are much more grounded and much more realistic and serious, for sure. And so the result is that you just don't hear these kinds of scores anymore. And I found myself saying, I'm not the type to look back and say, oh, it was better in the old days. But man, especially James Newton Howard, for a guy that's so known for big action scores, because remember in the 90s, he also did The Fugitive and Outbreak and Waterworld and The Postman and, the
Who
Joel
did the
Schumacher.
Firm?
Dave Grusin.
And it's all on piano, right? It's like
He's
all piano.
famously a wicked, talented jazz pianist. It's two
and
pianos.
all on one part of the piano too. It's like ding, 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 ding. It's all down here.
Oh, well, the whole thing, it's most of it is for him overdubbing himself. So it's like four-hand piano stuff. But yeah, all the chase kind of actiony stuff. Yeah, that was the pitch. Can we do an all piano?
It still holds up, by the way. That movie still holds up. So good.
He's a guy that you wish you would hear on stuff more frequently. But yeah, so I think James Newton Howard, I love that you have this kind of fixation on him because he's one of those composers that I think is so supremely gifted and has written boatloads of scores. I mean, it's just like he does so many big films. And he's not talked about.
See, I feel like but here's the thing that I feel like I'm being limiting because I completely forgot that he did The Fugitive. So I always associate James Newton Howard with movies like Dave. So if someone said, if I were to tell you, if I was directing a film, like Austin, my score that I would want for this to be, I would want this to have like a James Newton Howard vibe. If I said that to you, you're going to look at that and go, oh, well, what do you want? Do you want this to be more like
he
The
can
Fugitive?
do literally anything.
He can literally do anything. Like, well, no, when I say James Newton Howard, I mean, I want schmaltzy oboes and a big lush string section, stuff like that. So I feel like I use James Newton Howard as you said aesthetic, as a type, as a palette, rather than you're presenting James Newton Howard as this guy's he's a Swiss Army knife. He can literally do anything. And I feel like I have a tendency to put I think you'll probably really, this will resonate with you. I think I have a tendency to put composers into a certain, this is what you do. Who would have thought that Trent Reznor would be able to do
two-time Oscar-winning Trent Reznor?
Right. I mean, the guy from Nine Inch Nails was like, yeah, but if you put him with the right people, he's an incredibly accomplished. The score for Mank.
I was going to say Mank is the real testament to that this year,
Jesus
far more than
Christ.
Soul. Because to me, Soul actually it's basically Nine Inch Nails light. It's the same vibe. It's just reeled in so that it's not pounding it in your face, and it's tilted a little bit more positive, but it's still very ethereal and kind of otherworldly. It's just if you get rid of the kind of industrial carnage of it, it's still fundamentally like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what I would expect Trent and Atticus to do. Whereas Mank was like, this is as radical an about face as anything I could possibly. He may as well do the next Dave. You know, I mean, it was such a shock.
But I mean,
and great, well done.
With most composers, like we've talked about this before. John Williams came under the tutelage of Henry Mancini, right? He was a pianist for Henry Mancini. And so I think that I heard somewhere in an interview with him, he said that for the longest time he wanted to stay away from jazz because he wanted to move outside of Henry Mancini's shadow. And so when he finally got to do Catch Me If You Can, this was like, I feel like it's finally time that I can go back to, quote, my roots. So do you feel that?
For the record, I don't think he was avoiding it by the time you get to Catch Me If You Can. It had been so many decades.
He'd done a lot.
Yeah, I think by that point it was just all the opportunities, all the projects were, you know, Star Wars and Spielberg and things like that. But continue. I
was saying, is it not better to be considered like, get me, like you want the bat phone to go get me Austin Wintory because I know that I have to do a score that's going to be something akin to Abzu or Journey or
it's a question
Pathless.
Every composer wrestles with, right? I'm sure there's an actor equivalent to that of, you know, don't get me Troy, get me Joel, you know, like where on the one hand, we especially as freelancers, anything that makes the phone ring is a net positive.
Right.
But at some point you go, okay, can I make the phone ring in a more optimized way that will also feed my soul and not just keep the bills paid? And
to that point, do you know, I listen to music. I feel like in some ways I can be Neo in the, you know, Act 1 of Matrix and you're Joe Pantoliano being able to look at it, and I've been here a long time. It's like all I see now is, you know, brunette, redhead, and do you?
That so went sideways from where I thought you were gonna. I thought you were gonna say like I was the Morpheus character showing up to say, "What if I told you?" And instead I get to be fucking Joe Pantoliano.
Yeah, you're the backstabbing cigar.
I know
chewing.
that this steak is juicy.
But every time you see that scene, do you not want a steak?
It's so true.
Oh my God, it's so good. So my question would be, if someone goes, I really want this thing, and like they're trying to artistically and expressively go, I want this thing to emote a sense of sentiment and deep nostalgia. You're going clarinet, oboe. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. Do you do that? Is there a knowledge that you have of like, if I want you to feel a certain way, I know that I can have the oboe play this triplet, and you're gonna go.
There are certain things that are very reliable in that way, and so I actually am the opposite. It's can I not lean on the familiar? Is there a way to do this that doesn't feel like I've heard this in one form or another before? You know, can I set up, like if someone said, like I love Kobayashi Maru kind of compositional premises.
How can I fail?
Yeah, like how can I make this unwinnable? Where and then find the solution. You know, so if someone were to come and say, look, I'm making a really delicate, you know, father-daughter movie about how to deal with grief. And I'm like, okay, I wonder if it's possible to do that with only trombones. Like, is there a universe where that exists? Could it be? Because everything that we hold up, someone did as an experiment at some point. Nothing was ever written in stone. Like when instrument makers were refining the design of double reeds and crafting the oboe, it wasn't like, this is going to be really useful.
Do that one more time. What did you just do?
Exactly.
Do that one more time.
This is going to gel well with Jim Carrey and his son a few centuries from now. Like
right.
That, everything was time tested. And so I'm always saying to myself, now occasionally, of course, there's the taste of your collaborators, and sometimes they're like, yeah, but you know, I really love Dave. Like we really kind of, we don't want to fly too far from the source here, and you have to kind of navigate that. But other times, you know, they say, look, if you can be the next, if you can create the next Dave that just resets the clock, have at it. Let's try it.
But do you feel, as in the spirit of being a collaborator, do you feel that is if the guy goes, I'm using the same lens package as the same color palette that they did in Dave, and then, but we're not doing, obviously it's not Kevin Kline. Now we're using Timothy Oliphant or whatever. You know what I mean? And if you said, but I'm going to do the score with trombones, do you not inherently have that? Obviously, we're at the mercy of our betters. But if a director said, just go with whatever, you can do whatever you want. If you want to do a score with trombones, it's great. But based upon the aesthetic and what they shot and what they're going for, does that not limit you, but does that preclude you from making the decision to do a score just with a trombone? Because, you can take those risks, but if it's such an outlier comparatively, visually, how much does that play into what you write?
It's a really interesting question that there's no one answer to, because if they are basically going full-blown Dave homage, right, and that could mean that all the things they're trying to leverage about what we understand Dave to be is now covered, and it actually gives more space for the score to be different. Because it's like we've kind of we've used all that capital now that way. So that's one angle. It could be also the exact opposite, though, as you're saying, where if we do something that's now decidedly not Dave-esque, we're gonna stick out like a sore thumb. And it's going to depend on the taste of the collaborator and what they're willing to go along with. What I will often do is just say, let me try something, and it's no harm, no foul if it's just not landing. Like I'd love to walk inward from Crazy Town towards something more conservative than start really vanilla and then like add random shit to it just to try to make it more interesting, which feels ultimately arbitrary and shallow. So, let me pitch you something and knowing that this is where you have to just take the temperature of the room of what kind of project is this? How much time do you have? Especially on a lot of films, time is clicking away very mercilessly. So you have to gauge your scenario. This is where games is just so fabulous because we often are years out from the release. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to write a theme and I'm going to try to push as hard as I can. And if 10% of these ideas survive, it'll be a win because they're going to get this thing and they'll be like, I don't even know what this is. This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. But I really like that part at 43 seconds. Then I was like, then I got what I came for. Let's take that and, drop the cake slicer thing on either side of that and shove all the rest away and then expand this. That sometimes you just do a thing that's novel and right out of the gate, they're like, oh, that's great. We like it.
Pause real quick. So here's the deal. I have 8 minutes before I have to go. There's someone that's going to be here. No, right. It's not that. It's
no. I just mean when you said 40 earlier, I pinged a different out time from that. No worries.
You were right. I just got the text. Somebody's coming by that I have to take care of this. Pam can't take care of it.
All right. Well, then I'm going to skip over. I had 2 others teed up here. And maybe I'll insert them in the edit for future listeners without your reaction. Okay. One is Mark Shaman's Oscar-nominated score to the Michael Douglas film The American President, which is also lush, beautiful, gorgeous. One is Rachel Portman, who scored the movie Sirens.
Never seen it.
You know the movie though with Sam Neill and Elle Macpherson and it's also one of those just definitive romantic comedy scores. And I also have the Jerry Goldsmith score to because of course, can't not have Jerry. But there's a movie called Angie with not Rene Russo, Gina Davis. That's like a movie about a girl that gets pregnant, and the father is James Gandolfini in one of his earliest roles, and he's like an asshole, and she doesn't know what to do because she loves this other guy, but he's the father, and and it's kind of like a movie that the critics were like, meh. This is the one that actually catalyzed me thinking about this. So this is kind of like my finale playlist here, because this to me is taking it back to Silvestri. He wrote, I think, one of the great romantic comedy scores of all time, because it is just so fucking beautiful. You'll know what it is probably instantaneously because he plays his hand right out of the gate.
Okay. Here Comes the Bride.
Yep.
Oh, is this Father of the Bride?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me this isn't one of the most beautiful themes.
Oh, God, those strings. It's a ballet. Everything is doing something independent, but somehow in such beautiful, sweet concert with each other. And then they come together. Ah.
So much heart and soul in this. This music does not believe that it's making the movie cheesy. It believes that it's doing justice to the emotions.
Yeah. And there, it's slightly jazzy chords, which makes, and then you go straight into that, which makes it instantly reminiscent. It puts it in the 50s, which makes it sacred. You can't.
This, there's another, since I know we're on the clock here, there's a theme he writes for because this movie's so great. I even as a kid who didn't obviously have kids, but even now still also don't have kids, the sentiment of him struggling to make peace with the idea that his daughter is like flying the nest is so beautiful, and it's done in obviously crazy Martin Short, and it's all so silly.
Well,
but it's hilarious.
Steve
It's
Martin.
like The Wedding Planner.
Oh, of course.
And
whatever his name is. Oh my gosh, Brandon Wong, right?
Who is the other? He's got a cohort.
BD Wong. BD Wong. That's what it is. Not Brandon Wong. Brandon. That entire sentiment, by the way, can be summed up as he looks up at the stairs and he sees his little girl.
Oh yeah, the scene in the wedding itself, the wedding scene where what's great is that the whole movie's building towards the wedding. Finally, we get to the wedding, and dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to bring together this woman, and then we just push in on Steve Martin, and it blurs away the rest, and you would just hear his voiceover going, this woman. And we lose the ceremony. We just go into his thought. And then here's the theme that Silvestri has for specifically his daughter, Annie. That is, again, just, it's so him, and it's so beautiful.
his ability to use an orchestra so unobtrusively, to where everything is back here and just every once in a while something steps forward to make their point.
I couldn't agree more. I think to a modern audience, this might feel heavy-handed, but I maybe I'm getting older, but I hear that and I'm like, you know, that's
I also feel
so soulful.
I don't fault anybody for being able to go, hey, the reason why it's cliche is because it works. The reason why
Absolutely.
this is a tried and true thing is because it's tried and it's true. I have no fault with going to the old 101 or 102. If at the end of the day our point is to tell a story and to tell it as effectively and resonantly as possible, does it really matter if I use an oboe for fear of it being schmaltzy? I don't have any problem with that whatsoever.
I realized before when we were struggling to name a recent romantic comedy, the only one that I can think of that actually did embrace a language like this musically, and it was a huge outlier as a result, it made it more noteworthy in our modern context, was Crazy Rich Asians, which is full-hearted orchestral and a lot of big band. Like it wasn't shy, and but it's the first time in 20 years I can think of a movie like that. So yeah, anyway, I found this need to share Father of the Bride because I'm like, it's secretly Silvestri, you know, for the Back to the Futures and the Castaways and the Forrest Gumps and the Predators and, you know, his list of these. And so this is a movie easily forgotten in the list of those in his, you know, never mind all of his MCU stuff like we talked about, The Mummy Returns and blah, blah, blah. And the Zemeckis collaborations in general. So it was easy to overlook. Like, he wrote these two scores for Father of the Bride 1 and 2 that are both just magnificent. And they hearken to a bygone era that I think really generated some really, really spectacular scores, and everyone needs to have heard.